your 3-year-old daughter, Anaya's biological father, in hopes that he will acknowledge her and finally sign her birth certificate. You seriously doubt is yours. Is that correct?
I've come from a broken family. My dad was never in my life. He's not on my birth certificate either. My daughter deserves the best, you know what I'm saying? And this is why I'm here today, because I'm gonna make sure that his name is gonna be on that birth certificate.
Before we even met, like, she was living with somebody else at the time.
So when you met her and you all started talking, she was living with somebody else?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, come on.
On a little website, you know what I'm saying? I was with my ex. I explained to Mr. Platt. He was like, okay, cool, like, we're gonna talk, whatever. He agreed to it, you know what I'm saying? We went for a walk in the park. We ended up going like maybe every weekend or every other weekend, and it led from there.
And then you all started a relationship?
Yeah.
When truth walks into a courtroom, it doesn't knock. It breaks the door open. Under the eyes of Judge Lauren Lake, stories that begin in love often end in silence, but somewhere between evidence and emotion, the truth changes everything. There's a sacred tension that lives inside every courtroom. It's the echo of promises made, broken, and then brought forward as evidence. In the world of family law, no DNA test is just a piece of paper. It's a turning point. Judge Lauren Lake has seen countless people come forward hoping to fix the past, to name the father, to close the wound. But sometimes, what they find isn't closure, it's regret. People regret taking the DNA test, not because the science failed them, but because the truth didn't align with the story they told themselves. On Lauren Lake's paternity court, every episode unfolds like a human experiment in justice, emotion, and law. It's not just about genetics, it's about identity. It's about mothers seeking recognition, fathers demanding certainty, and children waiting for the validation that only truth can bring. This is where law and emotion collide, where Judge Lauren Lake stands as both an interpreter of evidence and a guardian of humanity. In the triple episode, he's in court to sign the birth certificate. 3 families walk into that courtroom, each one carrying years of silence, suspicion, and heartbreak. Their cases are different, but the core is the same. A missing name, a missing truth, a missing sense of belonging. The courtroom becomes a stage, not for performance, but for confrontation. Every testimony is a piece of a broken story. Every photograph, every calendar, every tear is a silent plea for acknowledgement. For Judge Lauren Lake, truth isn't a punishment, it's a restoration. Yet she knows better than anyone that not all truths are kind. The moment the DNA test results are opened, silence fills the room. That silence isn't about science, it's about consequence. Because truth, once spoken, cannot be undone. It becomes permanent, like ink on a birth certificate or judgment on a court record. This episode mirrors the balance between the relationship between law and justice, a theme that every attorney, parent, and child must confront. Law is about structure, but justice is about healing. Law demands evidence. Justice demands empathy. That fragile bridge between the two is what Judge Lauren Lake walks every day. It's the same bridge discussed on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal experts reveal how storytelling and ethics can redefine public faith in justice. But in this courtroom, those ideals are not theories, they're lived realities. Every DNA test begins with hope. Every result ends with change. That's the paradox of truth. It liberates some and destroys others. The mothers in these cases came with hope. The fathers came with fear. One wanted to prove love, the other wanted to avoid responsibility. But truth doesn't take sides, it just reveals. It's not about winning or losing, it's about becoming. Judge Lauren Lake's presence in this courtroom is more than judicial, it's pastoral. She listens like a counselor, interprets like an attorney, and decides like a mother. There's a rhythm to her rulings, a cadence that resembles a sermon and a verdict all at once. For many viewers, it echoes the redemptive stories shared on Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where confession leads to peace and honesty becomes healing. The courtroom in these moments is not a place of judgment but of rebirth. The first story in this triple episode reveals a young mother desperate to have her child's father sign the birth certificate. Her plea isn't about money, it's about legitimacy. She grew up without a father's name on her own certificate and doesn't want history repeating through her daughter. But across from her sits a man caught in doubt, a man who feels trapped between love and uncertainty. He questions timelines, relationships, and loyalty. In his eyes, the DNA test isn't a solution, it's a trapdoor. As they both recount their past, the courtroom becomes an emotional archive. The evidence, texts, photos, dates, becomes the language of their pain. Yet the weight of the case lies not in science, but in sincerity. It's a quiet exploration of how the concept of justice in jurisprudence extends beyond statutes and enters the territory of the heart. For Judge Lauren Lake, justice doesn't only mean applying the law, it means restoring dignity to those who have lost it in the process. When the DNA results are revealed and it's confirmed that the man is the father, the room transforms. The mother weeps, not because she's vindicated, but because the child will finally have a father's name and the cycle of silence might end. For the man, it's both a burden and a blessing. The truth doesn't just label him, it transforms him. The truth changes everything, not just for the people in that courtroom, but for everyone watching who has ever doubted, denied, or been denied. What makes paternity court so compelling is its reflection of life's moral paradoxes. These are not just DNA test cheating stories. They are human testimonies of love, betrayal, and resilience. It's no wonder why these episodes often feel like companion pieces to the Divorce Course podcast, where families and legal experts discuss the fallout of separation and the road to emotional recovery. Both platforms remind us that in family law, there are no clean victories. Every truth revealed leaves a scar, but also a space for healing. The second story in this triple episode explores the fragile edge between grief and confusion. A widow searching for direction after her husband's death ends up finding comfort online, only to discover she's pregnant weeks later. Now, she's in front of Judge Lauren Lake, asking for a man's acknowledgement while another man stands behind her, ready to claim the child as his own. It's a story of overlapping timelines and emotional chaos, where intimacy and insecurity blur. This is where the adverse inference in evidence act comes into symbolic play, not as a legal doctrine but as a metaphor. When someone refuses to participate in truth-seeking, their silence becomes its own evidence. In many cases, avoidance becomes an unspoken confession. The judge, trained by both compassion and jurisprudence, interprets silence not as protection but as consequence. When Lauren Lake delivers her reasoning, her words don't sting, they awaken. She reminds the courtroom that running from responsibility never erases it. The man's avoidance of the DNA test doesn't protect him, it indicts him. The DNA test is not the villain here, denial is. And as the results come forward, it's revealed that the man she accused is indeed the biological father. The crowd gasps, the truth lands, and in that moment both men, the biological and the emotional father, must confront the question, what does fatherhood really mean? The idea resonates with the Supreme Court's evolving interpretation of parental responsibility. Law may define paternity in genetic terms, but justice defines it in moral ones. To provide, to protect, to love, those are acts of law written not in statutes but in the heart. Lauren Lake embodies this interpretation as she guides the families toward reconciliation, not retribution. Every case in paternity court becomes an allegory about responsibility. It reminds viewers of the timeless question discussed in legal philosophy. Can truth exist without empathy? Can justice exist without forgiveness? These are not just courtroom themes, they are reflections of life. The third story, the adoption case, is perhaps the most haunting. A woman, raised in a family where she was adopted within family, stands in front of a man she's been told is her father her whole life. They've never met until this day. She's not here for money, nor revenge. She's here for identity. Her journey echoes countless adoption stories, full episodes that highlight the emotional labyrinth of finding where you truly belong. Her voice shakes as she tells Judge Lauren Lake that all she wants is closure. This story cuts deeper because it's not just about who fathered her, it's about who claimed her. The man insists he was told he wasn't the father, that rumors and assumptions shaped his choices. But beneath his logic lies regret, the kind that lingers in men who once had the chance to do right but chose silence instead. Judge Lauren Lake sees through that silence. She recognizes that his denial is not anger, it's guilt disguised as reason. The courtroom is quiet as the envelope is opened. The truth comes forward. He is not her father. The words drop like a gavel on memory itself. Yet, in that heartbreak, something unexpected happens. The man breaks down and says he still wants to be there for her. It's a rare moment where love outlives biology. This is the philosophy at the heart of the Game-Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast. The law can define roles, but only the heart defines relationships. Justice doesn't always mean victory. It often means peace. Through every tear, every revelation, and every signature on a birth certificate, one theme remains. The relationship between law and justice is not fixed, it's fluid. Law says, you must. Justice says, you should. And between those two, Judge Lauren Lake stands as a bridge, transforming courtrooms into confessionals and verdicts into beginnings. When the court adjourns, the words may stop, but the echo of truth lingers in every corner. Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom is more than a legal chamber. It's a living archive of the human condition. Each ruling becomes both a legal precedent and a moral parable, touching on the relationship between law and justice, and revealing how often the two are intertwined yet divided by emotion. The triple episode "He's in court to sign the birth certificate" embodies this contrast better than most. It's a story about identity, legitimacy, and how the truth changes everything. Beneath the surface, it's also a reflection of how the legal system works, not just to determine facts, but to restore balance where chaos has reigned. Every moment in Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom becomes a meditation on accountability. The viewers, often holding their breath through the DNA results, may not realize they're witnessing something deeper, a living commentary on the concept of justice in jurisprudence. It's the age-old question, should the law only punish or should it also heal? Lauren Lake's approach answers this question with compassion. Her verdicts do not simply conclude, they reconcile. Her tone doesn't condemn, it clarifies. In the modern world, we often seek justice through digital screens. The Game-Changing Attorney podcast reminds us that the law, when stripped of empathy, can become a cold weapon. Judge Lauren Lake redefines that image. She demonstrates that law infused with humanity can become the most effective tool for transformation. Her courtroom becomes a sanctuary for those broken by betrayal and blinded by denial. Consider the man who entered the courtroom reluctant to sign his child's birth certificate. To him, the DNA test represented humiliation, the possibility of becoming a statistic in another DNA test cheating story. But when the truth was revealed, it became the key to redemption. This shift, from resistance to acceptance, is the invisible curriculum of paternity court. It teaches not just the litigants but the audience that accountability is the truest form of love. People often say they regret taking a DNA test, but what they really regret is uncovering a truth that demands change. Because when truth confronts denial, something must give way, either pride or pain. Lauren Lake understands this psychological burden better than anyone. She knows that a piece of evidence doesn't just prove a fact, it reshapes identities, families, and futures. Each case, no matter how simple it appears, is layered with personal history. The evidence, a photo, a date, a message, is never just information. It's the residue of choices people made while trying to love and survive. The adverse inference in Evidence Act serves as a silent metaphor in these stories. It reminds us that absence can be as revealing as presence. When one refuses to engage with the truth, that very refusal speaks louder than words. Lauren Lake uses that principle not just legally, but emotionally. Silence becomes evidence of fear. Avoidance becomes the shadow of guilt. In the second case, where the widow faces two men over her child's paternity, the complexity of human emotion reaches its peak. Here, grief meets confusion and desire meets moral fatigue. The woman, lonely after loss, makes choices driven by pain rather than clarity. The two men, standing on opposite sides of the courtroom, represent two versions of fatherhood, one biological, one emotional. Both are real, both are flawed. When the DNA test results prove that the reluctant man is the father, it forces everyone to redefine what responsibility means. The man who doubted now faces a mirror, the reflection of his own hesitation. Lauren Lake's wisdom at this moment isn't just judicial, it's spiritual. She doesn't shame him for his doubt, she teaches him through it. She reminds him, and everyone watching, that law without grace can destroy, but law guided by compassion can heal. This is where the Divorce Course podcast often draws its strength, analyzing not just the rulings, but the emotional journeys that follow them. Divorce, separation, custody, and paternity are not mere legal categories. They are chapters of human evolution. They show how people rebuild after the collapse of trust. They expose how the pursuit of justice is also a pursuit of peace. Each time Judge Lauren Lake reads a verdict, it's as if time itself pauses. In that moment, everyone, the mother, the father, the child, the audience, faces the undeniable reality that truth has arrived. It's a moment as sharp as a verdict from the Supreme Court, yet as intimate as a family confession. The camera may zoom in on tears, but what it's really capturing is rebirth. And that's why the phrase "truth changes everything" resonates so deeply. It's not a slogan, it's a sentence of transformation. For some, truth brings reconciliation, for others, separation. But either way, it brings movement, and that movement is justice in its purest form. There's a profound psychological dimension to these stories, often discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, how individuals confront guilt, addiction, shame, and the consequences of their choices. Similarly, the litigants on paternity court are in recovery from lies, from generational wounds, and from emotional abandonment. When Judge Lauren Lake restores a father's name to a birth certificate, she's not just legalizing parenthood, she's redeeming a family's identity. The third story, centered around adoption, hits the soul hardest. The woman raised within her own family but without a father's acknowledgement lives in emotional limbo. Her story reflects the millions of adoption stories, full episodes across the world, each one echoing the same question: who am I? When she stands before Judge Lauren Lake, she's not seeking punishment or money, she's seeking belonging. Her testimony is fragile yet fierce. Every word carries decades of longing. She represents a different kind of plaintiff, the one seeking not judgment but connection. In many ways, her story mirrors the philosophical discussions in the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice, as taught in legal theory, is often portrayed as fairness, equality, or the proper administration of law. But in human experience, justice often means being seen, being known, being acknowledged. When the DNA results reveal that the man she believed was her father is not biologically related to her, the court holds its breath. The truth, once again, acts as both a sword and a salve. It cuts through illusion but opens the possibility of healing. The man's tears are not of guilt, they are of recognition. He realizes that justice is not always found in bloodlines but in intention. His willingness to remain in her life, after learning the truth, transforms the idea of fatherhood from biological duty to spiritual choice. Judge Lauren Lake captures this beautifully. Her words are not scripted, they are felt. She tells him that love is not erased by science, and that some relationships are written by destiny, not DNA. That moment, quiet and trembling, becomes one of the purest expressions of justice, when law bows to compassion and truth leads to connection instead of destruction. The story also reveals the human cost of delay. The man admits he once had a chance to know the truth but didn't act. His hesitation, his refusal to undergo a test decades ago, mirrors the kind of adverse inference that haunts families forever. In jurisprudence, delay can mean denial. In life, it can mean losing decades of love. The law can forgive ignorance, but time cannot. This lesson is echoed in many Supreme Court rulings around the world that have redefined the meaning of parental rights and child support. Modern legal thought has moved beyond mere biology. Courts now recognize that parenthood is not only about origin, but about care, consistency, and courage. Paternity court turns these principles into living, breathing stories. Each verdict reflects not only the evidence presented, but also the unseen sacrifices of those who dared to tell the truth. The theme of child support extends far beyond financial obligation. It becomes symbolic, supporting a child's sense of identity, stability, and emotional security. When Judge Lauren Lake compels a man to accept fatherhood, she is not enforcing punishment. She is enforcing presence. That's the kind of justice that heals generations. The truth changes everything, but only when we let it. Many people resist DNA testing because they fear the destruction of their narrative. Yet, the paradox is that embracing the truth often becomes the only path to peace. Whether it's a mother demanding recognition, a father seeking redemption, or a child searching for roots, every story in this courtroom becomes a testimony that truth, though painful, is never poisonous. Podcasts like the Game Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast often explore how law interacts with morality. They discuss how lawyers, judges, and clients navigate the emotional terrain of justice. But what makes Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom unique is her ability to transform that abstract discussion into living theater. Her rulings are the modern parables of accountability. Her compassion is the missing ingredient in traditional jurisprudence. Each time the gavel falls, a new truth is born. Some rejoice, some break down, but no one leaves unchanged. The evidence may fade, the cameras may stop recording, but the emotional consequences endure. That is the price and privilege of truth. By the time this triple episode concludes, the audience realizes that this wasn't just an ordinary courtroom battle. It was a trilogy of human revelation. From birth certificates to adoption papers, from missed chances to newfound courage, these stories demonstrate that justice isn't an abstract ideal. It's a living, breathing pursuit of wholeness. Judge Lauren Lake, in her firm yet empathetic manner, continues to redefine what it means to preside. She doesn't just uphold the law, she restores faith in it. And as the credits roll, her voice echoes a lesson that every person, whether in a courtroom or outside one, needs to hear. Truth isn't here to ruin you, it's here to rebuild you. When the doors of Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom close, the echoes of truth don't disappear, they ripple outward. Every episode becomes a mirror reflecting how fragile yet essential honesty is. What happens inside that courtroom is not confined to the litigants. It resonates with every viewer who